The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. And welcome to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We have Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet here with us in the studio. Thank you for being here. I'm so thrilled that you're here and that we have an opportunity to meet. Well, I want to remind everybody, and especially those people who are new to the show, that Dr. Grand-Pichet is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for 39 3/4 of a year. Is that what
years. This is the 40th year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, just amazing. And during that time, she's worked with individuals all over the spectrum of all ages and abilities and met a fair amount of autism parents. I would argue that you've met more autism parents than probably anybody else on the planet. I'm trying to catch up to you, but I don't think I can get there. I don't think I have enough time left to catch up.
Parents,
a lot of parents. And I just want to take a moment to say that one of the many things that I appreciate about Dr. Grand-Pichet is her ability to perspective take, and that she sees things from everybody's point of view. And that's so helpful to us in the autism community, that she looks at it from the point of view of the person who's on the spectrum in a very caring and specific way, and sees all of those individuals as individuals and as a whole person.
Thank you.
So often we meet people who go, well, it's a diagnosis, and they miss the person, and you really don't. But also, she sees it from the perspective of the parents and what that is like. More than any other person I have met, you are so caring about taking care of the parents and their journey, because this is a journey. And then I can tell you that she also is looking at it from the perspective of the people who are trying to help.
Yeah.
The therapists and the people who design the programs and the teachers, and it's a really impressive thing that you do.
Thank you very much.
Well,
I try. I mean, I'm very passionate about the parents, because that is the thing that kind of caught me at first and really got me into this field. And and I still remain very passionate about the journey the parents go through. And I think our role as clinicians is to try to make that journey as easy as possible, which therefore makes me very passionate about the quality of therapy.
Yeah. But I have to say that, when we use the word easy, it's a tricky word, right? Because I want to say to parents, as a parent, there's nothing easy about this.
No.
Because I got a tear.
Not at all.
There is nothing easy about
Not
this.
at all.
And I think that on the one hand, I see where you guys try to make it easier for us, but part of having our kids make progress is going to be difficult.
It's no question about it.
Yeah, because we got to let go of this idea that I think a lot of us think, we want to show up and you're going to have a magic pill and I don't have to have any emotions about it, and my child will have no emotions about it, and it will be easy peasy. That's not how it works.
No, it isn't how it works. It is very emotionally draining, because all of us, I think, naturally, we are, our nature is to kind of protect and take care and spoil and watch over and spoil, and that's
Are you
what
looking
we
at
do.
me while you're saying this?
No, I'm projecting. Let me tell you, I'm projecting.
No, I own that.
But I mean, that's how we are, right?
Yeah.
We're like, most of us are that way, and it becomes very, very hard because ABA is all about modifying the child's behavior by rewarding things that are good and not rewarding things that we don't want, and that's what's very hard. So, something as simple as the first premise of ABA, I guess, and very, very simple to tell a parent is don't give the child anything he asks for if he's tantruming, let's say. That's just an example, right?
Yeah.
Don't give anything that the child requests if they're crying or tantruming when they request it. And that sounds like a really easy thing to do, but it's a very emotionally draining thing to do for us as parents. So I get it. It's a very hard thing. And even more than the emotional aspect of it, Shannon, it's also just a lot of hard work.
Oh my gosh. It's a
Getting
lot of hard
therapists scheduled and having them come in and out and working yourself with the child, and just always, it's like you can't rest for that entire period of time until your child is as functional as possible and doing great, and it's a lot of work.
It's hard. There's no two ways about it. I always say, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to candy coat it, sugar coat it. It's hard. It's worth it.
Definitely
that's
worth
the
it.
thing. It's worth it. But I don't want to make it sound like it's easy.
Yeah.
But since we were talking about giving in, I want to go to a question on page 2.
Okay.
It says, good morning. Our therapist suggested using planned ignoring. Can I say, too, I forgot to give the disclaimer that no expert, even an expert of Dr. Grampiche's caliber, cannot give individual specific advice. So what we're going to do, I'm going to read her questions that have come from you guys, and she's going to give us information which then you take to help you to make decisions about what to do. But it would be a disservice to any person on the spectrum if we made it sound as if she could give individual specific advice in this format. So there's the disclaimer. So good morning. Our therapist suggested using planned ignoring for our son's attention-seeking disruption, which is banging on walls and tables. We have, but now we see he's doing it way more than he usually does, and my husband can't ignore it. After about the 7th bang, he intervenes and tells him to stop and sends him to his room. I'm scared. We just made it worse. Please help. It's hard, right?
Yeah, it's very hard. And I'm going to tell you what just happened. So what just happened is that actually has a name. It's called an extinction burst. So an extinction burst is a behavior that increases when you start ignoring a behavior. It will increase before it extinguishes, before it completely goes away. And the reason for it is very simple. If you think about, again, this is the task of putting yourself in the child's position, right? And thinking like the child. So from the child's perspective, they have been getting your attention when they're banging on the wall or table. And perhaps they get your attention. It's negative attention, but it's attention nevertheless. Perhaps up till now, they've been getting your attention after 2 or 3 attempts. So it's now you're ignoring the child. And in the child's head is this dialogue of, wait a minute, why aren't they paying attention? Why aren't they reacting? I'm going to hit longer. I'm going to hit harder. It's the same thing as when a child screams and you ignore them. Before they stop screaming, they'll scream as loud as they can because their assumption is you're not hearing them. And it's the same thing here. The child's assumption is, well, what's going on? They're not giving me my usual attention, so I need to increase it. And so temporarily, it just got worse because what's happened is that the child now has a new baseline. So now the child knows that you might not react after 3 bangs, but you will react after 7. So it's okay, it's a temporary setback, and what you need to do is just go back to what you were doing, but this time don't give in. If your husband has a really hard time, I ask that he just gets up and leaves. The best thing to do is, and even if you're at a restaurant or wherever you are, like he could just take a walk and by the time he comes back, it'll be over. It will get worse before it gets better. That's called an extinction burst, and that's a natural part of ignoring someone's behavior. So just know that and continue doing it because you were doing it right. And, it might go up to 10 bangs or 20. It doesn't matter. You just need to ignore it. You need to win by ignoring it.
I want to tell you two things that I tell parents from my experience. The story that I always tell about when I understood extinction burst, because we think of it as just being the children. Oh, it's this strange, odd thing that just children do.
No, not
apparently,
at all.
we do it too.
Everybody does.
And my perfect example is, for some reason, I don't know why, but the bathroom in our master bathroom, the light does not. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And we moved into this house. And, usually it works. So you go over and you turn the light switch on and light comes on, woohoo, right? We don't even think about it. It's just like a part of our lives that we do that. But then it blew out at one point, and ever since then it's been tricky. But I came into the bathroom, and I'm an adult, and I understand how light switches work. I turned on the light switch and the light did not come on. So I didn't just walk away and go, I guess it's not going to work. I stood there for a solid 3 minutes flicking the light switch on and off, convinced that I was going to get my result. And I went, look at that. That's an extinction burst right there, because I'm used to flicking the light. Light comes on. It didn't do it. So instead of walking away, I stood there and flicked it, good solid 3 minutes, had myself a little extinction burst. And then I gave up and left and went away. So just know that you and I do that all the time. We do things like that. That's just one example. But one of the things that I learned a long time ago from great therapists is that when we have anxiety about things, that we can have a replacement behavior too.
Oh, of course.
So if we have something else to think or do, it's easier to do the things that we have to do. So what I was taught by great therapists is when my son is doing something that is not what I want to see and I'm supposed to do planned ignoring, whether it's an extinction burst or something else, that I have to have something internal that's happening that's reinforcing to me so that I don't speak about it.
Very good.
And so what they taught me was, especially during an extinction burst, to stand there and take data on it to say, okay, so because I'm going to have to tell the team later on, so what's he doing? Oh, he's spitting. Oh, now he's throwing something. Oh, it's 2 minutes in and he just threw something. So I've got an activity to do. But when it gets really heightened, to say to myself, oh, an extinction burst means it's working.
That's right, 100%.
Which means that this might be the last time he does this if I just hang out, take data, and not react. This might be the last time.
That's a really good tactic.
And that gives me something to do instead of, because we see I like to verbally vomit.
Absolutely. And the extinction bursts are the toughest thing. I mean, oh my gosh, I remember when my third child, I was like, this is what you experience when you ignore a child crying at night when you're trying to teach them to sleep.
Yeah.
And they will have an extinction burst because they're screaming as loud as they possibly can because they want you to do the same thing you did before and you're not anymore. So, it's very, very tough for a parent to sit through an extinction burst of a child screaming, hitting their head and all that sort of stuff. And these are very good tactics, and it is absolutely true that the extinction burst is a sign that things are improving and that it is coming to an end. Let's put it that way. Another way to look at it is that you don't want to fall victim to an extinction burst. There are whole businesses that are gambling. The entire field of gambling is built on the premise that we will all have extinction bursts because you don't always win, right? So you keep trying to win. And that, so you don't want to be the person that gives in. You just want to be the person that wins this process. And what you have to do, like Shannon said, keep yourself busy, keep your mind busy, count. Don't be embarrassed. Analyze the fact that part of the reason we give in, it's not that, I mean, I can understand that also banging head on wall, or it's not even banging head, it's banging on walls and tables. So it's probably just an embarrassment factor. I'm guessing that it happens in public and it's sort of like, what do I do with this and so on. And I think you just need to realize that it doesn't matter. Let's count it. Let it go up to 20. Let it go up to 30. You can handle 30 bangs. It's no big deal. Start with that, and then 7 will seem like nothing. You know what I mean? And just ask yourself, how many bangs can I actually handle?
Yeah. We've got parents writing in on Facebook. Raina has written in and said, I'm working really hard on controlling my anger and being patient. Being an autism mom of 2 on the spectrum is life-changing and draining me out. How do you keep yourself sane with no respite and no family around? And Buena has written in and said, Raina, I'm right there with you. I have a very energetically loud 6-year-old on the spectrum. He seeks sensory, stomping his feet, pulling my hair, and a new thing he's picked up is he tries to touch between my thighs. Why?
Yeah. So you guys, I'll go to the first thing. There's 2 things I want to say, which is really important. First of all, I mean, let's start with just the answer to the last question. The things that he's doing are probably because that's how he gets your reaction. And he's figured out that that's how he will get a reaction. And a lot of times our kids are just trying to get attention. They're just trying to get a reaction. It's entertaining. It's, that's what typically kids will do. They want to get attention. So you have to block those types of behaviors and walk away. A lot of times it's hard to walk away because obviously we're afraid of what the child might do and all that sort of stuff, which brings me to the bigger issue is that this is not something simple. I'm a behaviorist and I'm a licensed psychologist, and I've been doing this longer than anyone. As Shannon said, I've been working with individuals on the spectrum for over 40 years. It is not something I would do alone. This is where you really need a village. This is that case. You need help and you need support from other people. Even if it's just something as very simple as when you're sitting and waiting and the child is banging their head or crying or whatever it is, and being able to tolerate that. Talking to another person during that time is so incredibly helpful to be able to just say, oh yeah, so like, what did you do today? Like literally, it is not only good for the child to see that you're doing something else and they're not going to get your attention, but it's mentally helpful to you to be able to have someone else's support during those times. But in general, like people don't realize, this is why I get very, very passionate about our parents and parenting through this process. In general, parents are not getting any sleep. I mean, you're just like running on 2-3 hours of sleep because the kids are awake, and nobody realizes that. It's not something that any one person can handle. So please don't try to fight that battle. It's not a winning battle. You need to have a few people who can assist you, help you, so that you can sleep, so that you can take time off from it, so that you cannot be angry, so that when you are with your child, you have a heightened level of patience, because all of that is necessary. Otherwise, honestly, you can't survive. So before you do anything else, just try to get some help. And that can come in the way of family members who are willing to just tolerate for an hour or 2 hours so you can take a bath or relax or rest. Neighbors, I have a lot of stories about families who are very successful because they have the entire neighborhood pitch in and try to help. Make it, so you try to get some friends involved, try to get people involved who could just give you a little bit of support, because that's really what you need, is just a little bit of support. I don't know how you would possibly be kind of making your way through it alone.
Yeah. And we're getting ready in March to do a big show about IHSS because we've had a lot of questions on the show about it. We're bringing an expert in to talk about that. But that's in-home health support services. And aside from if you have insurance for ABA, aside from if you're in a state like California where there's regional center and you can get respite through that, if you're in the United States, my understanding, and again, we're going to have an expert in to talk about it, is that you can, there are certain criteria, but if you've got a child with autism and, you've got some issues, and clearly almost everybody does, you should qualify for services, and you can get respite through there. You can choose the provider, so you don't have to just get a stranger, because a lot of people have concern about that. And there are additional tag-on services that can be really helpful, such as being able to pay for someone, you or someone else, to take the child to medical appointments, which includes ABA therapy, because if you're taking them, it's time away from work or it's wear and tear on your car. So you can get paid to take your child, or if you can't do it because you're at work, they can pay somebody else to do it. So I just, if you're in the United States, there are services. It takes a while to track things down, but that's just one thing that you can look at for respite. If you're not in the United States, either of the two ladies who just wrote, please write in and tell us what country you're in, and I'll do some research and figure out if there is another way. We have seen parents be so creative. I don't know how when they're underslept.
Right.
We have seen them, one parent that I can think of that got her church to help out, a parent who was in a college town and got a local sorority. To each sorority and fraternity has to have a project in the community. So a sorority adopted her child as their project, and they provided respite, and even some of them got trained to be able to do ABA with the child. Amazing. I know somebody else who was able to do it with the Knights of Columbus in their community.
Yeah.
I mean, I get chills thinking about all the possibilities. You might be too tired to see it, but write into me and let me see if I can find some resources in your community. I can't promise that I can, but let me look while you're sleeping.
Absolutely.
And you can write into me at s.penrod@autism-live.com. That's true for anybody. We need to take a short break, and then we are going to be back with more Ask Dr. Doreen after these messages. Stick with us.
Love is a battlefield. Autism and PTSD for parents. It's a thing. I'm here to tell you it's survivable. What you need to do is remember, this is not for the faint of heart. There's actually a study that was done on mothers of children with autism, and it said, oh, this is very similar to PTSD among soldiers. And we're like, we needed a study for that. We already knew this. However, you got to remember that stress is very important, not only because it's just stress that we're all dealing with, part of the modern day life. It can have serious effects. Not only does it affect your child, your spouse, other members of your family, it also affects your health. The stress is linked to immune system conditions, which can be creating conditions like risk for cancer, heart attack, stroke, anxiety, social isolation, which also depresses your immune system further, and even, girls, listen to this, hair loss. How do we handle this kind of chronic battlefield condition? Well, we have to do what generals do. We get the troops together, we demand support, we push for what we need. So when you go into your meeting with the schools, be sure and you have people with you, because it can be very difficult if you don't have someone with you to help you. Get letters from the doctors, get your evaluations, do what you need to do to get what you can for your child, because that ends up making your stress less. Over the years, as you deal with this kind of stress, remember, it can be your friend because it can tell you things need to change. It can also be your enemy because it can create a lot of bad conditions. The moral of the story is, don't be too strong for too long.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. I just had an emotional moment because I saw that we had somebody write in who's one of my favorite people. Karen on Facebook said, hey, it's Karen from Oswego and in a good place. Want other parents to know that there are good places in life when facing autism. It's not all bad. It's tough, it's work, but there are good points. I don't know if you remember, but a million years ago when I had a radio show called Everyday Autism Miracles, And the first ever episode, I was so nervous and paced because who was my first guest going to be? Dr. Doreen Grampuchet, right? Because how am I going to start a radio show and not have her on the first ever show, right? But my whole thing, one of the things that I like to do when facing something that makes me nervous, I think, what's the best case scenario and what's the worst case scenario? Because it's going to be somewhere in between, right? It's not going to be the worst. It's not, and it's not going to be the best. It's going to be somewhere in between. And so I have Dr. Grampuchet on the call on this live radio show. We get a live caller in. It was Karen from Oswego. And Karen wrote in and said, "This is making me furious because you're making it sound like, there are possibilities." And it was my worst nightmare, that somebody was going to call in and say, none of this. But it actually
ended up being okay.
It was not only okay. Karen and I have been friends for all this time.
Amazing.
Because I went to college in Oswego, and I went back and taught college in Oswego for 3 years. So I had occasion to go back to Oswego, met with Karen and their whole the Oswego Autism Alliance, and had a wonderful. I mean, we're like sisters in my mind. Karen's probably like, no, we're not. But in my mind, Karen and I are sisters, and we've known each other all this time. And I know that Karen faces a lot of challenges, but I love that she's in a good place right now and sharing it with other people. And Karen's like a touchstone for me that, I'm literally there from the very beginning with both of us.
Yes.
Because that's the first time I ever spoke to you.
I do remember that. It was funny because I was actually coming off of an interview that I was doing at Chapman University. And I remember quickly running to my car and doing the interview with you in my car. I fully remember that.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and now we're all connected because our fabulous Samantha is a Chapman graduate.
Yeah, so
there we go. Okay, and then we have a couple more people writing in on Facebook. My son is almost 3 and has a hard time sitting down in a chair. How can I get him to sit? And we have another question about a grandson who licks everything. So should we deal with the chair first?
Sure.
Okay.
But can we also, just to address what Karen had written in, we absolutely don't want people to think that there are no positives in this. There are no question. There's, what I always tell parents is that having a child with autism is one of those rare opportunities that slows life down and lets you appreciate every milestone and every accomplishment. Most of the time, and I've tried very much. I'm a very, very engaged and active mom in the life of my own children. But having said that, still, I look back and I'm like, oh dear Lord, how is my youngest just about to finish high school? And how did that even happen? And so life is very, very fast. And I think with our kids on the spectrum, we really do learn, because it takes a little bit harder work and a little bit more effort to make things happen. We really do appreciate every little thing. I know that because a lot of the moms come and tell me, this was the first Christmas he joined us, or this was the first time he said, I love you, or this is the first time he's actually able to tell me what's going on in school, or make a wish, or tell me when he's in pain, or little things that we take for granted.
Or he told a lie.
And
we do the happy dance when they tell the first lie, right? And our friends with neurotypical kids look at us like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm celebrating that.
Exactly. So, there's a lot of good stuff to be said about this experience. And also, the other side of it is just the people, the human beings that our kids are. I really want to talk about that for a minute. When I go to a center, I was at a center last night, and I just love our kids. They are the best of the best. I cannot even express how wonderful they are, because they don't have a lot of the stuff in typically developing kids that, I don't want to label it good or bad, but not having certain characteristics allows you to be very genuine. So for instance, our kids don't really get embarrassed by certain things. So a typical child of, let's say, age 6 or 7 would be very shy, perhaps talking to strangers or people they don't know very well. Our kids, on the other hand, are kind of like, hi, who are you? What's your name? I'm so, and they're just so like, just raw awesomeness. Like they're just so pure love and just connection and humanity. And I don't know how to explain it. There's nothing, they don't hide anything, and it's beautiful. And it is more beautiful even as they age, because even our children who like finish everything and they're like out there on their own and so on, some of the stuff they never learn, Shannon, is being bad.
Yeah, being mean.
Being hurtful, wanting bad stuff for others, being jealous. Like a lot of our kids are just sweet, lovely human beings, because they never learn the other stuff. They never, there's no reason, there's no reason, they're not in competition with other kids in some ways. So they just always maintain that certain level of purity and beauty in them.
Yeah.
So those are the amazing things. And then there's also the other side, which is like, they have an incredible way of seeing the world, which is actually, I always like to say, getting more and more, I guess it's merging with where we are in the world now. So in other words, some of our kids, they don't see life through all different angles that we do. They see it in a much more narrow angle in one way or another. And sometimes that narrow angle happens to be things that are happening much more, like technology. A lot of our kids have incredible abilities in the area of technology. Or memory. A lot of our kids have an incredible visual memory, or various things that are now like spreading, and actually I feel, are learning to be more a part of their world and their lives, and the two worlds are merging in some ways. So I feel like individuals who have a different way of thinking are the reason society moves forward to begin with. If we all thought the same, we'd never really accomplish anything new.
Amen.
So, those are all of the amazing things about autism, and I want to be clear that I very much value those things as well. And it is hard when they're little and they're learning to fit into society. But, to some extent, we want them to fit in, and to some extent, we want them to have their unique differences as well.
Absolutely. And look, there are people who are going to get it, and there are people who are not going to get it. And I think that's been one of the hardest things for me as a mom on this journey, is that I had an expectation that all of the people who loved me and cared about me were going to be people who welcomed people of different abilities into their lives. And it's always disappointing when you have the moment when you see somebody who doesn't.
Right.
And it happens. But, first of all, I have seen people change.
Yes.
I have seen people get it. Because when somebody that they care about then has that, then they automatically get it.
Absolutely.
And it's painful for them, but they get it in that moment. But also to realize that, I get to choose who I want to spend time with.
Absolutely.
And the friends that I have made on this journey of people who get it, people like Karen who get it. I mean, like, I wouldn't trade that for anything under the sun.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And to be in the company of a group of people, I remember when Eustacia Cutler, who's Temple Grandin's mother, said to me, she said, one of the gifts of being an autism mom is that you find a tribe. And that we all need that in life. And I went, that's it. I found my tribe.
That's so
and
true.
we are so different, and we may not even agree on everything, but it doesn't matter. If Karen said to me, I have to go into this knife fight, I would be like, Karen, I got your back.
Yeah.
I'd be there with you.
Yeah.
And there would be no questions asked about it, right?
I'm just imagining.
Knife fight. Right? At best, middle-aged moms, but Karen, I got you 6, Karen.
If there's any moms in the world who would actually do a knife fight, it would be autism moms. Let me tell you, for sure.
We say that because we think a lot of things in our minds loom as knife fights, but.
So funny.
Yeah.
Sorry. So now we can go back.
We had our first little gift that we did last week, which was me taking off my earrings to yell about this doctor.
Oh, okay.
And it said, when a autism mom gets mad, we take off the earrings. So it's a funny thing. I should have had a knife on the table too, but that might have been perceived as being violent, and I'm not. Just take the earrings off. Okay, so my son is almost 3 and has a hard time sitting down in a chair. How can I get him to sit? Man, I remember those days. I remember looking at the videos of DTT and going, well, if I could get him to sit in the chair, people, how do you get him to sit in the chair? But they did.
Yeah. So the concept is just really basic. It goes back to the idea of reinforcement, right? Every behavior will occur if it has adequate reinforcement in place. So everything, like there are people who climb mountains because it's reinforcing enough to them. It's not to me, but hey,
or me.
But realistically, we have our own reinforcers, right? For me, maybe a reinforcer would be, if someone gave me a guarantee that my children would be healthy until the age of 100, I would climb Everest for that. I would. So basically, everybody has their own reinforcers. So you have to identify what your child's major reinforcers are, and hopefully you can do something that is like, let's say, a short-term visual reinforcer. Like most of our kids enjoy either watching TV or a computer, right? That would be or an iPad or a game or something like that. So what you do is you just get a chair. You actually start with the child having to sit on the chair for, let's say, 2 seconds on a timer, and you just show this child, like, whatever it is. Like, let's say, I don't know what the child's baseline is. I don't want to say 2 seconds because it's entirely possible the child's able to sit right now 10 seconds. So what is your child's baseline? What is the amount of time he or she can actually sit? Start there. So when the child sits down for that period of time, let's say 10 seconds, you then will give them a reinforcer. So let's say an iPad or something that they like.
Do you give it while they're sitting or after they're done sitting? Okay.
While they're sitting, because you want to also condition the whole act of sitting to a positive thing, right? Okay. And then you just gradually increase it. Okay. So tomorrow you'll do 15 seconds and then give them a reinforcer. Then the next day you'll do 25 seconds and you will gradually increase the duration of time. You will hit a point where the child is like, wait a minute, this is getting too long. And you just need to be very wary of that, because sometimes we have expectations of our kids that are unrealistic. So what is an appropriate period of time? And I would look at other peers perhaps, and that's very helpful to identify what is an appropriate period of time for our children to sit. Now you have your child sitting, at the end of which they are given an iPad for a period of time, okay? So let's say the period of time that they receive their reinforcer is, 10 minutes, right? So in the beginning, you're starting out with a very high amount of reinforcer, low demand. This is always the case. Low demand, high reinforcer. And over the course of time, your job is to increase the demand and reduce the reinforcer. Why? Because reducing the reinforcer just gets you to what real life is like. And increasing the demand gets you to what real life is like. So your goal would be to increase the duration of time the child's sitting on the table, on the chair, to what is expected of other peers, and then reduce the reinforcer to what is given to other peers. So for instance, if the child is in, let's say, class, and everybody has an expectation that they're gonna sit for 10 minutes at a time, well, guess what? The kids are getting natural reinforcers while they're sitting because they're listening to a story, let's say, or they're interacting with peers, or whatever it is, it's social reinforcers. And our child is not getting that. So you need to put in place a reinforcer that works for your child, but then reduce it. So let's say if you're practicing this at home, which I suggest you do, and you don't practice it at school, if you're doing it at home, you want to get to a point where realistically you can have your child sit for 10 minutes and then just get on an iPad for 1 minute. And that's your goal. You don't start there, that's where you end up. And then once you're at that point, you want to vary your reinforcers, right? So occasionally the child, you won't every single time give an iPad. You'll give other reinforcers that are also reinforcing for the child. You just have to have a list of them always available to you. In fact, anything you want to teach, you should always have a list of things that are going to be effective reinforcers. If you don't have at least 2 or 3 things, you're not going to be an effect. You're just not going to be able to change behavior. Behavior change depends on reinforcers. And keep in mind, reinforcers are not always tangible objects. Sometimes they are activities. Sometimes they are the ability to stop doing something. So escape is a reinforcer. So that's a little too complicated. We won't get into that.
But you know, if you want to watch video of this being done with a child, they do this
Absolutely.
with Jack Riley on the A Word. The A Word is a series that there's like 54 episodes, and if you go to our YouTube page, it's one of the playlists. And fairly early on, I don't know which episode, it might be episode 6, they are getting him, before they're going to do ABA seated with him, they get him first to come
Yeah.
when they call him, and then to sit down on the chair, and they give him reinforcers for it.
Right.
And your child is almost 3. I just want to tell you, send you a hug that, you know, my son started ABA therapy right after his 3rd birthday, and the thought of being able to get him to sit in a chair, I was like, my goodness, if that could ever happen,
Yeah.
like, let's throw
That's
a party
amazing.
for 100 people. And I just want you to know it happened, and we celebrated it and moved on to the 3 million other things that he eventually did. So just know, like a lot of things, it will happen.
And
follow the steps.
Right, and I apologize for interrupting you, Shannon,
No.
but I interpreted the question as wanting to extend the duration of time sitting. But realistically, if you just want the child to sit, you prompt the child. You simply put a child you put a seat behind the child, prompt the child to sit, immediately pop a reinforcer, which should probably initially be some sort of food reinforcer, because it's very short term and fast, like a tiny, tiny morsel of a cookie or something that your child chip or whatever they like, and then you let them up. So it's but extending the sitting period, you want to have a timer that extends the duration of time. And something as simple as sitting does seem very, very hard, but it isn't really. It's funny that you said that, because back in the day, we would teach sitting and standing before coming.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yes, at UCLA we would teach it in that order. And I don't think it really matters. You could go one way or another coming. You need 2 people. Sitting and standing is a very easy thing. You just physically prompt it and reinforce the child. But basically, don't think that these things are not possible. They're very easy to teach.
Yeah.
And yeah, as Shannon said, IBT has all of this stuff on video, Institute for Behavior Training.
There you go.
And then, of course, Skills has all of the instructional guidelines for whoever is working with your
If
child.
you need the curriculum, Skills for Autism, FORautism.com. Phone number is 877-975-4559. Tell them Shannon sent you. You'll get a discount. Okay, I want to move on. Another question that came in on Facebook. My grandson licks everything. Why does he do this, and how can I help him not to do it? He's 5, and in kindergarten he is diagnosed with autism and in general ed classes.
Mm-hmm. So there could be a lot of different reasons for why he's licking objects, and I don't want to be just a behavior. As a behaviorist, I would say you need to actually look and see several different things. So take some data and then come back to us so we can help you with this. The data that you're looking for is when exactly does he do this? So what is happening before he licks? And then what is happening right after he licks? And this is very important, and I'll tell you why. Because it could be that he is licking in order to get attention. It could be that he is licking in order to get out of a particular activity. It could be that he licks and other kids laugh, and then he thinks that's positive attention. I don't know. I just need to know what's happening around the behavior each time it happens. And it could be different things, but we have to find the common theme of what, it could be happening inside the classroom, outside, whatever it is, but the same thing happens each time. And that's what I'm looking for, is like, what is happening before and after the licking? Now, that's the behaviorist perspective. The other perspective is sort of a medical perspective, and I would want you to talk to a physician and try to make sure, get a blood test, and make sure that he doesn't have any significant deficiencies. I have had many children licking various things that actually fulfill a deficiency that they're experiencing. For instance, some children might lick walls because they have a calcium deficiency, or metal objects because they have low iron. You need to kind of check and make sure that he's not experiencing a deficiency. Now, third thing is sensory. Why don't we take a look and see if he's licking a particular texture? Because it is also possible that he might be craving a texture on his tongue. So these are the types of things you want to gather some data on, and then come back and we can talk about what to do in each case, because it's going to be different for each situation.
And since she mentioned he's in kindergarten, she can also be asking school to take some data on it as well.
100%.
If you do that, ask them to take an FBA on the licking,
Absolutely.
functional behavior assessment, and then they'll come back to you with that, and come back to us once you have that information. Okay, I think we should take a short break, and then we're going to be back with more of your questions that you guys are writing in on. We've got Facebook and YouTube coming in, so thank you very much. Stick with us.
Hi, Lisa Ackerman back with Talk of Facts. Questions, real life questions and answers for the autism journey. Oh, are you ready for this one? Talk to me about puberty. So what I would recommend is, first and foremost, is the kids that have done the therapeutics, the medical, and the dietary allergen removal interventions tend to have an easier time at puberty. Seizures are really common for children on the spectrum, more than neurotypical populations, and they're especially most common right at or about puberty time. So it's extremely important, even if you have a 10-year-old, that you've already done an EEG, that you consider before they go through puberty to get a second EEG done. Just because you have one clean EEG with no abnormal brain activity or seizure activity, you need to do another one prior to puberty. That's one of the most common calls we get with teens on the spectrum, is they are often experiencing a seizure for what their family thinks is the first time. And the third thing is, you're gonna have a teenager, so you're really gonna have to kick it up a notch on those life skills, social skills, and getting your kid ready to be that teenager they need to be. So if you're doing that baby thing, and I know you are, where you're maybe making their lunches or helping them with laundry, we need to start bouncing some chores over to those kids. And we also need to increase social environments where they can be successful. So think about it. We've got 3 really important things that we need to look at. Puberty is a very serious issue, and we take it very seriously. So make sure you have all of your therapeutics, medical, and dietary interventions in place. Consider to do another 24-hour EEG with your physician prior to puberty. And the third most important thing, get ready to raise the bar. Your job is to really get them ready for life. And I know you can do it.
welcome back. Just want to say that Karen wrote in and said that one of the best things she ever invested in was a visual timer, and we love visual timers. It makes a great deal of sense. And so thank you for that, Karen. I want to pivot now on Facebook. We have a question. Hi, my daughter has ASD. She's 4 years old. We've been doing ABA. We're doing 30 hours a week. Good for you. She's middle functioning. She's nonverbal. Her progress is slow. We're using Prolo quote to go. But my question is, how far will she go?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the question that we all have, right? I think she can't go to normal school. Will she be going to special education? Please help me. Kids coming out of special education school, I'm not sure what that means, but she says, I'm worried for her future.
How old is the child?
4.
And she's nonverbal, did the mom say anything about how much intervention she's already had?
Well, she's doing 30 hours of ABA a week now, but we
Okay.
don't know what happened before. So I know you're on Facebook, so if you're still watching, write into us as quick as you can because we're getting to the end of the segment.
Right. And don't equate being nonverbal with not having intelligence. That's actually very important because sometimes our kids are nonverbal and they have other issues going on as well. For instance, sensory input issues and dysregulation and so on and so forth. But don't let, I don't want to, I have had some children who are able to communicate in very advanced forms non-verbally.
Oh, yeah.
So, sometimes our kids have a very hard time vocalizing things, but nevertheless, they're very intelligent and they can do really, really well going forward. So, it's really a matter of, is she getting quality therapy? How long has she been getting therapy? What kind of progress do you see? What other issues there are? It's a very difficult question for me to answer without knowing your child. As Shannon said, it is like probably the most common question I get asked. And really, before I answer it validly, I have the child go through hours and hours of assessment so that I can actually see how they're functioning, what are the things. And I would recommend that. Excuse me, I would recommend some assessment. If your child's 4 or almost 4.
She said 4.
4, yeah. So your school district usually does some assessments every 3 years. I don't know if you're getting any kind of services from your school district, but insurance will cover assessment as well. You need to do some assessment evaluation to identify kind of where your child is and what their needs are. So that's where I would start, because outside of that, everybody can just give you an opinion, and that's not going to be good enough.
Yeah. I just want to point out that we're going to be talking a little bit about Carly Fleischman in the next hour, and she is a nonverbal young woman, and I would encourage you to look at some of the things that she's been able to do, because it will inspire you, like the top of your head's going to come off
That's
when
right.
you see what Carly's been able to do. And also to remember that, the nonverbal thing has changed so much in the last few years. It used to be, I had a parent write into me and say that only 20%, when her child was diagnosed with autism, only 20% of kids ended up being verbal. And that is completely flipped the other way now. That they're saying it's 80% now of individuals with autism will be able to communicate verbally.
I've never heard that statistic of 20%. Like, to me, nonverbal and remaining nonverbal is at most 20%.
Right.
Like, really,
Well,
I've never
that's
seen
where
it.
we are now. So just know that there's a whole lot of hope.
Absolutely.
And I know one of the questions that I hear asked a lot when somebody says that a child is nonverbal is they say, are there sounds? Are they able to make sounds? Are they making approximations? Are there words? And that
doesn't
can be
even matter.
built upon.
And it doesn't even matter, because to me, sign language is communication.
Absolutely.
An OG device is communication, so there's a lot of other ways of communicating, and I think it's really important to note that, especially today.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially with
there's so many-
technology. And we're going to
exactly.
have a technology in the next hour that's talking exactly about this kind of thing. So I want to say to you that I remember saying to people, how far are we going to get? And wanting and needing to know that. I think that's typical and normal for every parent to do that. But also don't limit yourself to whatever you hear back. Because
Definitely.
we have seen it time and time again that anything is possible, that it really depends on the individual and the amount of support that they're given, that, anything could happen. So don't limit yourself to that. Really quickly, because we're just about out of time, Liz has written in and said on YouTube, my 7.5-year-old and his repetitive jumping behaviors have gotten worse. It was okay with me since it wasn't a bother, but now he will stop eating or activities to jump, even spills things by accident.
So there are certain behaviors where you just simply need to block them and replace them. So assuming, and we haven't done an FBA, so we're not quite sure what the function of the behavior is, that would be very important. You'd want to find out why he likes to jump. It might be a physical experience, or it might be a visual experience. Or it might just be avoidance of some other activity. Like, you really need to have someone come in and identify the function of this jumping behavior. And so assuming that it's like, let's say, avoidance of another behavior, you need to make sure that he doesn't get to jump until the other activity is completed, so that he doesn't get to avoid the other activities. That's really important. If it's a visual type of self-stimulus, sensation that he's receiving, then you can allow the jumping as a reward for some other thing. And you get it under control that way, and you limit it to certain time frames when jumping. I mean, a lot of kids like jumping, but they do it when it's appropriate, like on a trampoline or so on. But let's start by getting an FBA, like figuring out what the function is. Now, if you have access to a behavior analyst, they could do that. If you don't have access to a behavior analyst, one good way to do this is to go on skills and go in the portion that says CFA, which stands for CARS Indirect Functional Assessment. And when you go in there, you can answer a bunch of questions about this jumping behavior, and then it'll offer you some suggestions of functions that could be related to it. And then you'll hopefully recognize which function. And then the CFA actually tells you, it connects to what's called a behavior intervention plan builder, and it'll give you suggestions on how to treat the behavior. Every behavior is different. So honestly, if he's jumping for sensory input versus jumping to avoid another activity, you're gonna have completely different interventions to deal with the same behavior, which is jumping. That's why it's really important to know what the function is.
And just in the time that you were answering that, Jordan wrote in on YouTube and said, what do I do if my daughter keeps biting people in class and chewing on her clothes? She's in 8th grade. And a lot of what you just said, although jumping and biting are vastly different things, and there are different consequences for them, and there are different considerations, especially at school, it's still looking at what the function of the behavior is.
Absolutely.
And they can do that on skills, as you were just saying.
Definitely, and those are two separate behaviors, so biting people and chewing on her clothes, but they are both related to oral motor, and I'm guessing that she has some oral motor issues going on. It's possible also, with a child like that, I would be definitely increasing some oral motor activity at home, like for instance using a vibrating toothbrush inside her mouth, things that are going to stimulate the muscles inside, which will then help her need to do that outside decrease. But then I would absolutely be looking at what happens when she does that. It's very possible she gets a ton of attention, good or bad attention, doesn't matter. It's very possible that she's like getting access to objects that she wants by biting people who don't give it to her. So, you really need to start with doing the functional assessment to figure out what each of those behaviors are accomplishing for the child, because that's the key to behavior analysis.
And especially because that's at school, that behavior is happening at school, in writing, ask them to get the BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst, that the school has on staff, because they probably do, to do a functional behavior assessment, an FBA. So you can say, get the BCBA to do an FBA on the behavior. They'll go, ooh, they know what they're talking about. Because if you don't, they're going to move her placement and say that she's a danger to the other students. And then you're going to be in a world of hurt. So make them get you the function of the behavior, make them get the behavior intervention plan, get it all in writing so they can't say, oh, we didn't know. I would jump all over that.